The City of Boston recently came out with a new version of its website. This follows the first redesign in 10 years. If the old version was a directory of city government, the new version is more clearly about doing business and getting help. To help us with a walkthrough is our guest, the city's Chief Digital Officer, Lauren Lockwood. Thank you very much for being with us, Lauren. First of all, I think a lot of people were surprised, maybe, even I was, because I was used to the old version. I see just mainly a picture in boston.gov and I say, my gosh, is that all there is? I guess this is completely different.
It is different. There are a lot of things that are different about the new website. Most striking for a lot of people will be the visual change. So we have a style guide for the city, which is the first of its kind. So we've made those actually public, but there are a lot of changes sort of behind the curtains. So users might not see that the first time they visit, or just from looking at the image. But we'll certainly see that by accessing content and looking at resources.
Right, you don't have to scroll down very far before you realize this works kind of like Amazon.com.
That's right. So there are a lot of changes that we've made to it. One that you'll immediately notice is that it's mobile responsive, which means if you're using an iPad or a mobile device, it'll be a better experience even than desktop, which is much like Facebook or Amazon that you're used to using.
Talk about how important it is, because a lot of our viewers are used to doing things on cell phones, smartphones, as opposed to those bigger computing devices. So how does that change the way you design things?
It changes it dramatically and in a lot of ways. So first of all, with the point about mobile responsiveness, I think it's important for us to think about, it's not just about being on the go and needing to pay a parking ticket from your phone. More and more people, especially from lower income demographics, are using smartphones as their primary means to access the internet. And so really designing a website that's made for all devices is really a digital equity issue. And so by making the site mobile responsive, we're truly making a site that's accessible for everybody in the city of Boston. But having a website that renders well on a mobile device is not just making sure that the pictures shrink down and that the experience shrinks down, but also making sure that we're not using really long blocks of text, making sure that we're keeping it short and also very conversational.
Well, one thing I appreciate is that before, instead of searching where I go to pay my tax bill, I'll be going through maybe the Treasury Department or something. You've got something right on the homepage there. You want to pay the tax bill, and then just click on this little thing here. I mean, that seems to be very user-friendly.
Yes, I mean, there are a lot of really simple changes that can make people's lives easier, and so we decided that rather than organizing all of the content by department as it used to be, we've now surfaced a lot of the common transactions and common questions that people come to the city with. So in addition to being able to pay your parking ticket or pay your taxes directly from the homepage, you'll also see things like the street sweeping schedule. It'll just tell you today is the third Monday of the month, rather than having to look on a calendar on your phone to scroll through and see what the schedule is. A
couple of other new things. One of them is getting around the city. At first, I wouldn't think that's something the city would be in the business of doing, but how did you arrive at that?
Yeah, these things we're calling guides are really ways of us curating content into themes that you care about. So rather than having to hunt through the transportation department's page, go to the MBTA's website, we can try to pull that content together into one place, so that people who are looking for information around on getting around Boston can find that in one place.
Or looking for a home.
Exactly, so that's another one. We also, a topic that'll become very relevant soon is moving. So we've tried to take some of the most common pain points that people have when dealing with the city and try to pull that information all into one place so they don't have to hunt for it.
We're talking with the city's Chief Digital Officer, Lauren Lockwood. Lauren, what about the process of designing? How did you talk to people, figure out what you needed to do?
Sure. So the website redesign was really not so much about technology. A lot of people think about website redesigns as purely technological change, but we started with conversations with people. So we sat down with people of all different walks of life, experiences with technology, and different languages to try to figure out what should the website be for them. And so we spent a number of weeks and actually months talking to users, and then rather than going behind closed doors and building a website, we spun up a very quick site that we launched in early January called The Pilot. And we, instead of sort of waiting until we were ready to launch a full site, we instead built on that website every couple weeks up into the launch last week. And so what people saw last week was really a project that has been in the works, in public, in front of users constantly for the last several months.
What about the things people were telling you in those meetings before?
We heard so many interesting things, and I think the theme that really resonated with us is that we found that a lot of people were telling us in different ways that there's a really big difference between making information available and making it accessible. So the old website had a lot of information. The problem was that people couldn't find it, or the font was too small, or screen readers couldn't read it. And so what we focused on was making sure that those resources, at a minimum, were more accessible for people. And so we sat down with users in a variety of contexts. So we sat down with them physically, we reached out to them via surveys, we sat behind one-way mirrors, and really watched how they used the site. And so we changed a lot of where we were headed based off of that feedback.
Of course, accessibility also means making it work for people who have disabilities. Was there some thought put into that too?
Absolutely. And so one thing that we hold very dear to us on our team is that we can't represent all of the citizens of Boston, just the 5 of us. And so what we strive to do is make sure that we reach out to groups who represent different demographics in Boston to make sure we're testing the website with them. And so we specifically worked with our Commission of People with Disabilities to put the website in front of people with who are visually impaired. And so we sat down with them and learned an awful lot about what was working and not working about the site and made changes to that. And in fact, even after we launched the website, we're constantly making changes based off feedback. And the very first production push we did was to make the font even darker because we got some feedback that it was too light for people.
It was.
Yeah. And so we were quick to make that update.
Now, I know you have other features here. You have a quick way to pay parking tickets, and there are reminders of the 311 app. Now, that app was introduced last year, I think. So
Yep.
what did you learn from how that's been working when you went to do this redesign?
So 311 is a way for constituents around Boston to request city services via phone, Twitter, app, any channel really. We launched that sort of brand for it last August, and so we're coming up on the year anniversary. And I think the most important thing for us about 311 is how important that human connection is between constituents and government. And so what we're trying to do, not just with 311, but throughout the website, is make sure that people feel that human connection. Because dealing with government is not just dealing with a bureaucracy or a cement building. What you're really doing is you're interacting with human beings. And so you'll see that in the language we use. You'll see that in the imagery on the website, and also even down to the fonts that we're using to try to make it feel more human.
It's interesting that we don't see the higher listing of mayor and city council offices, but they're at the bottom of the screen on the homepage, but you see their faces at least, right?
Yes, yeah. It's very important to show the people behind the work, and not just the elected officials, but you'll see a lot of imagery on the site. And actually, one thing worth mentioning is we had a lot of images we had to source. And rather than hire a bunch of photographers, what we did was ask the public for their photos. And so the city has a Flickr page where we've asked for photos from people, and we've had hundreds submitted and are using them across the site.
Well, thank you very much for being with us. Lauren Lockwood.